This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. All right, my friends, you want to get the inside scoop on marketing? Well, we're here with the CMO Whisperer, Mr. Steve Olensky. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, David. It is such an honor and pleasure to be here.
So your reputation precedes you. You've got this marquee name brand parade of fantastic, huge corporate marketers who are not only your clients and not only your colleagues, but they seem to be your friends, which is really weird. So give us the whole Steve Olensky backstory. How did you kind of come up in the world of marketing and befriend all of these amazing Fortune 500 marketing types?
Yeah, and sometimes I still have to, pinch myself, right? And I have the kind of the moment of where I keep waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and go, like, we're on to you, right? This isn't, And I don't know if you know Bob Newhart, the famous comedian. He lived his whole career like that. It was one of his mantras, and I love that. So I've always maintained that kind of humble, waiting for someone to come in my door right now. Like, we're on to you, right? So my career has been just an absolute whirlwind of circuitous paths. I won't start all the way back with my first job as a paperboy. I will spare the audience of that boring story. But I did start out, like the rest of my family, in the world of supermarkets, right? And our father was a bigwig at the old A&P food chain, if you remember that.
Oh,
food
sure.
chain. And I'm the youngest of 6. And all of us, when we got to be 16, it was not like, hey, do you want to get a job? It's you're getting a job. Okay. You're going to work as soon as you're legally old enough, which I know is probably radical in today's world, right? But my father, like all my siblings before me, when I turned 16, I said, okay, he's like, basically, pick which store you want to work at because he had that much clout and you're going to go work, right? And he didn't make a call on my behalf. I had to go in and fill out an application and do all those things, right? And so I started bagging groceries, bringing in carts, mopping floors, literally getting my hands dirty, right? And I spent about 10 years doing that. And I eventually migrated to the white collar world, but I have never, ever forgotten that roll up your sleeves mentality of getting dirty, right? It has served me unbelievably well in my career. So my first white collar job was literally making outbound phone calls to members of the AARP for Prudential Insurance Company. And it was basically trying to convince people not to cancel their plan. And it wasn't the most glamorous role by any means. And then I eventually moved into a marketing role, which I had no experience in. By the way, I didn't graduate college. I only did 1 semester at Community College of Philadelphia. I was the classic college is not for me. So I started in this marketing role, literally had no clue what marketing even meant. I had some great mentors to this day I'm grateful for. And then probably sometime, David, in my early to mid 30s, I literally had an epiphany in my life. And it was to write. And it was just to create, and just stuff was pouring out of me. No idea where it came from. Have never taken a writing course in my life. I learned the hard way. One of the toughest things a human being can do is change people's perceptions of you. So my family and friends saw me in this one kind of box, right? Of, okay, you used to work in a supermarket and you were a manager there. That's great. And then you did some marketing strategy, but creative writing, really? Like, what do you know about creative writing and copywriting, right? So I was so fortunate. Again, I had another person befriend me who was a copywriter, took me under his wing, showed me the ropes kind of thing, gave me the freedom to express my creativity. And on the side, I was writing poems. I was writing short stories. It was literally pouring out of me through my pores, literally, right? And I was very fortunate at the time. My wife at the time, I'm now divorced. My wife at the time was very supportive. And I had one other person in my life who was really supportive. So there were 2 people who were, and it was really important to have that. And I eventually moved on to becoming a full-blown copywriter. Then I got hired at an actual agency as a senior copywriter, a very small agency, but I didn't care, in a suburb of Philly, right? I ended up working on a Super Bowl commercial of all things, a regional spot, but still a Super Bowl commercial, right? Which I'm very proud of that to this day. And the owner of that agency really, really gave me my first big break in terms of creative writing. And then from there, I got jobs I bounced between marketing roles. I went back to Prudential. I took creative agency roles as well in terms of being a creative director at another agency, copywriter, creative director / copywriter. And then somewhere where the whole blogging thing started. What the hell is a blog, right? Weblog, right? I mean, I bet you how many people even know what blog is short for, right? So again, this is all just pouring out of me. It was like a tidal wave. I couldn't stop it. So I started my own blog. I don't know if you remember the old GeoCities from Yahoo, right? Which is ancient. It was one of the first free platforms. It was kind of WordPress before WordPress, okay? And I said, hell, I can have my own site, like my own website. First of all, what's a website?
And Steve, what year was this roughly?
Oh, gosh, probably mid-90s.
Okay, like 95, 96.
Yeah, somewhere in there, whenever blogging took hold, which is like a billion years ago, right? And I remember, people thinking, what? You're doing a what? A blog, is it? What does that mean, right? So I started just writing, right? Whatever I felt like writing. There was no holds barred, right? Mostly about just my own experiences. And if I saw a TV commercial that caught my eye, I wrote about it, right? So one day I'm sitting I'm a creative director or copywriter at an ad agency. I'm sitting in my office, and it's one of these seminal moments, right? And I'm sitting in my office and I'm reading the printed version of Advertising Age or Ad Age, which is a Bible in the ad industry. And I'm just leafing through it, right? There was nothing online. It was printed version, right? And I see the masthead and I see the list of key contacts and I find the editor's name. And his name's Ken Wheaton. And Ken and I are still friends to this day. He's no longer there. And I see Ken Wheaton, editor, and here's his email. Email. What do I have to lose? I have zero to lose, right? Craft out an email. And the email would become a precursor to what would become my writing style. It was completely self-deprecating, completely tongue-in-cheek, starting with the subject line. I sent it off to him. Literally, like I remember like it was yesterday. Got up from my chair, went to get a cup of coffee, which I'm rarely without a cup of coffee at the vending machine, whatever. Came back, 10 minutes later, there's a response. To say I was blown away would be a massive, massive understatement.
Do you remember what the subject line was?
Yeah, I think it was something about over-caffeinated writer looking for a home or something like that, right? Right. Which, of course, that's me, right? And his email wrote back, hey, Steve, I loved your email. I get 1,000 emails a day. Yours cut through the clutter. What would you like to write about? So, David, I sat back in my chair and had like this surreal, like, is someone like punking me? Is this really happening? Now, this is Ad Age, right? It's still big to this day, obviously, but back then it was even much bigger. And I remember I had to tell some people, right? So I told my boss and they were like, what? Oh my God, you're going to be, blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, I'm going to write an Ad Age. And I think it was something about mascots or something like that, right? I ended up writing something about brand mascots of all things, right? Who cares, right? And then, the printed version shows up. And of course, I'm like the celebrity now in the office because Steve Olensky, bylined an Ad Age, and the owners of the agency, who I thought would be over the moon because it said Steve Olensky, copywriter, the name of the agency. I'm thinking, this is huge, not just for me, but for them. Well, they didn't get it, right? And that was another precursor of things to come. And I went, okay. So I, kept my blog going. Ad Age wanted me to do another piece. I wrote another article, and then I had something appear in Adweek, okay, which is another big Bible, right? So I got an Adweek. I'm thinking, this is amazing, right? X number of months later, I hear about Forbes starting this thing called the CMO Network. Now, I readily admit, I'm not even sure what CMO stands for at the time, right? And I go, yeah, I got some street cred. I got Ad Age. I got Adweek. I'm going to reach out to them and see if they're interested. Sure enough, day later, I get an email. I end up on a phone call with the editor. We'd love for you to come join the CMO Network in Forbes. I went, what? I'm sorry. What was that? This is Forbes, right? So again, like I'll never forget, I wrote my first article. I had to submit it, right? They changed one word, right? And then published it. The next day, I get a login, an email login with here's your login and password, which they basically said, here's the keys to the kingdom. We trust you enough to go in and publish what you want when you want. We don't have to read it. To say this was an incredible amount of responsibility was off the charts.
And this was after the first article.
Yes.
Amazing.
Exactly. So I went, okay. And right from that second, I knew it was a ton of responsibility. I could not go on and just write whatever the hell I wanted because, first of all, they take it down and then they basically fire me as a kid. I wasn't getting paid, but I didn't care. It was Forbes, right? And I started then to atomic bomb exploded in me of writing, right? And it also, it came to my kind of consciousness going, well, you know what? There's a lot of people I want to meet. There's a lot of great people and a lot of things I want to do and a lot of places I want to go to and events I want to go to. And if I can leverage the fact that I write for Forbes, there's no shame in that, right? So I did. And I literally, over the next 10 years, I probably, oh my gosh, as you mentioned earlier, these folks are my close, dear friends now. And these are leaders, CMOs, CEOs of the biggest brands in the world.
So you use the writing and the interviewing as a relationship builder and as a networking tool. And you built genuine relationships after you interviewed these people to continue the relationship, deepen the relationship, continue adding value, and really intentionally befriend these folks.
Yes.
Because they were awesome, interesting, cool people.
Yes. You use one of the key words in my life is genuine, right? And I'm very genuine. I'm very transparent. I take a lot of pride when people tell me that. And a person who gets interviewed constantly says to me, this is the best interview I ever had. You're the easiest person to talk to. Someone likened me to Howard Stern once. It was a CMO. And they said, no, I don't mean a bad way. They go, because you put people at ease and you have an incredible ability to just make people feel very comfortable, very trusting of you. That is an incredibly rare gift. And I take that to heart, right? As you could imagine. So again, over that 10-year window, so many CMOs, so many CEOs. Then I had athletes, and I got to interview like Jerry Rice and Joe Montana. I got to interview Kevin Durant, who's a big basketball player. And I was the cool dad because I parlayed that into a meeting for my son, who was 10 at the time, to meet his basketball hero, Kevin Durant, which I was the ultimate cool dad, right? Then I got to go to things like the Grammy Awards twice and spend not just the night of the show, but a whole week leading up to the show, and got to rub elbows. And I got to meet one of my personal heroes, Sylvester Stallone, because he's a Philly guy like me. And his whole story, I'm not going to get into the backstory of Rocky, but he had $300 in the bank. And if you know the whole story, talk about surreal, David. It was, and still is to this day, when I'll show people the picture of me and Stallone, right, at this party, and I'm in my rented tux, right? And I'm waiting for that tap on the shoulder, like, all right, I don't know how you got in here, but you got to leave, right? And, there's Richard Branson over here. There's Michael Keaton over here. There's Jamie Foxx over here. And, at this huge Hollywood bash the night before the Grammy party, I could not believe. And I remember one time I had a bit of an out-of-body experience where I caught myself and I literally stepped over to the side of the room to take everything in. And I just went, you are really, really blessed. You are really lucky, right? Thank the Lord. Thank whoever you need to thank, the universe, whatever. And it was a very, very another seminal moment for me to go, you are incredibly lucky and blessed to be here, right? And then I went back and just kept engaging people and enjoyed myself. And from that, it was like I went to the Kentucky Derby, and then I went to the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, and all these different things and all these different experiences and it's the people, though, David, is really what is at the heart of who I am. It's the relationships, right? And that's one of the things I love to kind of help people. I love to talk to college kids. I consult other companies. I talk to people. The root of everything to me is relationships, and relationships are my currency, right? And I'm a very rich man when it comes to, I'm a very, very rich man. And I don't take that for granted 1 second. So that's my kind of long-winded, roundabout way of how I got to where I am. And the name, by the way, the CMO Whisperer, was bestowed upon me by the former CMO of Walmart and Barnes & Noble. Her name's Julie Lyle. She's one of my dearest friends. She's one of the smartest people in all of marketing. And she just kind of said it in passing one time. When you don't stop and think about an idea, it just comes to you, or you say it. in passing. And I remember we're having a conversation and she says something like, you're like the CMO Whisperer. I went, oh, I like that. I really like that, and it's stuck. So here I am.
Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. Oh my gosh. Well, so many great lessons in there. And I want to ask you, there's like 17 questions that stem off of that, but we'll take them one at a time because it's tough to ask 17 questions at once, much less, Steve, for you to answer 17 questions at once.
Right.
So one thing I love about this story is you've really embedded yourself in a specific niche or target market, which is CMO's marketing world, advertising world. And you made that your home. And you made that your home with where you publish, where you network, where you make friends personally and professionally, the events that you attend, the events that you get invited to. Because in the agency world, I'm guessing you were kind of exposed to all these different opportunities. How did you get over that FOMO, that fear of missing out? Like, if I make my home over here, I'm saying no to a whole bunch of things over there.
Great question. And I've also coined another phrase called fear of being found out, like I talked about before.
Right.
So it's whatever that is, FOPFO. To me, they're very much one and the same in a lot of ways, right? I made the conscious decision, and I knew when I started at Forbes, I got to know a lot of the other contributors, right? And I remember one day having this kind of awareness of, well, they're writing their stuff and they're sharing their opinion. Okay. And Lord knows I don't claim to be the smartest person in the world, but I realized that I can use, right? I'm going back to using that platform because there's so many people I want to get to know. I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to learn from so many other people. There's brilliant people out there. And if Forbes will open the door, then I'm going to use that. And I made that very, very conscious decision. And I remember talking to another contributor who reached out to me one time, because I had done an interview with somebody, and I forget who it was, but it was a real famous CMO. And they said, how did you get that? And I said, I asked. Oh. And then it hit me about, well, that's how I got in Ad Age. I asked, So I realized one of my mantras is you don't get anything you don't ask for, right? What did that email to that Ad Age editor cost me? 30 seconds, right? What did the email to the CMO or the football player or the movie star or whatever that I wanted to talk to cost me, right? Now, sure enough, eventually the dynamic shifted where after a couple of years at Forbes of doing outbound, I started getting a ton of inbound. So PR people started hitting me up. And of course, the same kind of ultimate dynamic, the ultimate end game for me was establishing that relationship, right? I didn't care how it came about. If I wanted to meet you, I'm going to reach out to you. Or if I get a pitch email that says, I'll give you an example. I'm a teenager of the 80s. So one of my favorite shows in the 80s was Cheers. Well, I got an email one time to interview Ted Danson. Absolutely. I want to talk to Ted Danson. He was doing something for Smirnoff. And it was an amazing conversation, and he's like, Steve, oh my God, this is awesome. You're such a great interviewer. And I'm going, if he only knew, no training, right? No schooling, nothing. It is all just so natural. But then I realized that's what endears me. So I'm getting a little off topic. I apologize, but
no, I love this. Well, let's talk about, because I think there's a sort of an art and a science to the kind of interviewing that you do. And, as I'm looking at the website now, of course, as you and I are talking, I'm vibing on the classic Playboy interviews of the 1970s and 1980s. And yes, folks, the articles were good. The articles were actually very good. So these professional interviewers, and there's probably about a half a dozen of them that did, 10, 20, 30 different Playboy interviews over the years. And I have these anthologies of the interviews. They would prepare to an unbelievable level. They would do this incredible amount of research. They would then go into the interview. It would be a mix of prepared questions and then listening extremely carefully for what the person was saying. So, okay, I'm going to scratch my next question. I'm going to pursue this rabbit hole that this person just opened up because that's much more interesting than my next prepared question. And these interviews became these three-dimensional revelatory, this is kind of like Barbara Walters and Oprah, and they would say things to these interviewers, like I'm sure they say things to you, that they've never even said out loud to another human being before.
Correct.
So walk us through your process a little bit, Steve. How did you research and prepare for the interview? Give us a little bit of a flavor of what these interviews were like moment by moment. And then what did you do after the interview to continue building and deepening the relationship?
Great question about questions, right? So I was the anti, and I didn't do this consciously. It just was who I am. So the anti setup, I of course researched who I was talking to, right? But 99 out of 100 every time I interviewed somebody, and it could be the biggest person in the world, this is how it started. And I'd say I'm interviewing you. I say, hey, David, just so you know, this is how I normally operate. I don't take any notes during our call. I don't record our call. Okay. What I do is I have what I lovingly refer to as an old school conversation, where it's just two human beings talking. We're not texting. We're not Snapchatting. We're not Instagramming. We're not doing anything else. We are literally engaged in an old school conversation, which is really who I really am at my core. I'm a conversationalist. I'll say that to them, and I do today. And then I say, look, the reason I don't take notes is I learned the hard way two things, very important lessons. One, I couldn't read my own writing, first of all, as I took notes. Secondly, I found it distracting to the interviewee, which in turn, then I read that as a sign of disrespect, and I was not having that, right? So I'll say to somebody, look, this is why I don't take notes, right? To me, it's very disrespectful. I want to listen to everything you're saying to me. I want to have this very old school, like I said, especially in the digital world, where the art of conversation is a dying breed, right? And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow up with a couple questions through email, through your reps or whatever, and then you can respond. You can write a little or as much as you want. There's no chance of me misquoting you because I'm literally going to lift what you say, okay, for my article. David, in the, oh gosh, I don't know how many interviews I've done in my career. I've lost count. I have never, ever had anyone say to me, no, I'd rather you just take notes. I'd rather you kind of don't follow up. Or it has been the polar opposite. That's amazing. I've never done an interview like this. It's so refreshing. It's so unusual to just have an old school conversation, just like you and I are doing right this very second, right? We're just talking. We're just engaging. I have my cup of coffee. We're just hanging out. And then when you juxtapose over the fact that these are some of the most busiest, most successful people in the world, and then you realize they're being pulled in so many different directions, right? And their time is so valuable that for them to just literally, oh, wait, I can just talk? And I'll say to them too is, this is all off the record. Like I said, I tee it up. It's all off the record. I'm not recording. I'm not writing. You can say whatever you want. Feel free to, and these are people who don't even know me yet, okay? That foundation is the most rock solid foundation that I can do. And again, I'm not smart enough to go, oh, this is how I'm going to, it just came out of me. No one told me this. No one taught me this. It was just who I am as a person to just talk to somebody, okay? So the conversation would happen. I send the email. They write me back some answers. I write my article.
We're talking to them for like what, about 30, 45 minutes?
30, 45 minutes at least. And very often, as I'm sure you know, because you've interviewed more than enough people in your career, is that you get into the personal side of things, which is then, obviously when you get to that level of comfort, right, it's a whole nother level. I don't do this consciously to go, all right, I need to ask this person about their family because no, hell no. It's got to be very organic, right? And then I'll use again, here comes back to my style, my self-deprecation, right? And I'll make fun of myself, make light of myself. I'll crack a joke. It always breaks, if there's any ice, which there normally isn't any ice to begin with, right? One of the greatest things, and I actually teach this, and I'm sure you know this, what I'm about to say. One of the greatest things you can hear back from somebody when you're talking to them, whether it's an interview or just a man on the street, when someone responds back to you with the following, in so many words, that's a great question. That to me is so gold and priceless when you get that back from someone, right? Because what that tells me is, one, I cause them to stop on a dime and to think about something in a way they've never thought about before, right? I'm telling you, it's one of the greatest things I ever hear when I interview somebody, right? The CEO of the Fortune 100. That's a great question, Steve. or I haven't thought about it that way. That is priceless to me, right? But again, I don't sit there and go, all right, what question can I ask to elicit that response? It's never going to happen, right? And your point about having, a list of questions, and most times if I'm working with someone and their PR firm, they want a list of, can you send me some samples? Sure. Here's some 3 to 5 basic questions, which I rarely stay on script, right? But your point about if someone says something provocative, right, you're not going to go, hey, that's great. Question 4 is, of course not. And I liken it to one of the other things I've done in my career, which I love, which probably won't surprise you, is I've moderated a ton of panel discussions. And that to me is an art as well. And the art of that, I don't know if you've ever done that or not, but an art to that is the same thing. You have to listen. You have the questions. You meet with the panelists before. Hey, guys, here's what we're going to talk about. Here's the initial list of questions. But we may not get to all of them because I'm going to veer. I'm going to come up with other stuff as we talk. It's organic. It happens in every conference, just so you know. Whereas I've been to events and sat in the audience of panel discussions where it's clear. It's painfully clear. All right, thank you. Moving right along. And the audience is going, no, I want to hear more about what they just said. And the moderator's thinking, I got 20 minutes. I have 10 questions. I have to get through all of them. Oh, it just drives me crazy. So...
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Let's talk about panels for a quick second, because I think you and I are probably on the same page with this. You have 4 panelists. Mm-hmm. You're the moderator. The unfortunate tendency is to get 4 5-minute keynotes. Person number 1, 5 minutes. Great. Person number 2, 5 minutes. And the rest of the other people sitting there like a bump on a log going, I'm here for 5 minutes and that's it. And I got my little micro keynote and everything is so compartmentalized. My guess is that you like to mix it up. You like to have them kind of crosstalk and comment and respond to each other. How do you facilitate that and not have them do the individual 5-minute keynotes and then, okay, folks, panel's done?
Again, it's me being, whether I was born with this or whatever, but it's listening, of course. But then it's also reading. Let's say I'm watching 4 panelists, right? And you're one of them and there's 3 next to you. You say something and I'm watching the reactions of the other 3. Well, I'm not going to let that go, right? I'm not going to go, all right. And then Bob, your question is, no. Bob, what did you think of I saw your reaction? Like, I'll call them out, not in a bad way, but I'll say, it seemed like you had something to say about that, right? And I have a great example of this. I was doing a panel at Harvard about 3 years ago. And on the panel was a gentleman named Bernd Ullman, which you probably never heard, but Bernd Ullman is, I think he's called like the $1 billion brain guy. He's done stuff with Sears, Jennifer Lopez, Adam Levine. Like, he's a guy behind these really big name brands and personalities. The second person these are all friends of mine. The second person was a gentleman named Evan Green, who at the time was the CMO of the Recording Academy, the Grammys. And then the third person was a gentleman named Kerry Gordy. If you know the name Gordy, Kerry's father, Barry, is the founder of Motown. And all of us have become really close since then. So I'm moderating this panel. It's a music entrepreneur conference, right? And I'm moderating this great discussion. And I don't remember, but Evan said something, and I watched Kerry's reaction. And I said, all right. Now, Kerry, who I love now, it's like a brother to me, is never at a loss for words, right? Which I love, right? And I said, all right, I got to go to Kerry when Evan gets done. And I did. And they actually disagreed with each other, which, it's kind of like talk radio when you want to have it, it makes for better ratings. And not that I'm like Jerry Springer, back in the day, like pouring gasoline, not at all. But I also knew enough as the moderator to step back and let that conversation grow organically, where they were very respectful, very like, no, I don't think, I disagree, blah, blah, blah. And what you know, to this day, we still talk about that, right? How the respectful dialogue versus a moderator going, okay, thank you, moving right along. Right. So there's a definite art form to it. There's a definite skill set to moderating a panel, and listening and reading body language.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about the Steve Olensky empire for a moment. What do you find yourself doing now in the middle of this kind of COVID crazy upside down time? And what is exciting and what new projects and new initiatives are you looking forward to?
So right now, I'm a director of communications at Oracle for one of the most successful teams in the whole company. And it's awesome. And I work with a great team doing a lot of the things that I love to do, a lot of thought leadership. I'm ghostwriting for, which I do for executives all the time. And now I'm starting to do for our leadership team. So that's really great. And I also have my site, which is CMO-Whisperer.com, where I write to as much as I can. I do some stuff for a smaller publication called CMS Wire. My stuff gets picked up quite a bit from other outlets, but my relationships are really my goal. And I'm constantly being approached and asked to coach and help executives. And one of the things that I'm really excited about that I'm working on is creating a practice to help CMOs with the recruiting process. Because the recruiting process and hiring process for CMOs is ungodly antiquated. And I don't know if you know this, but for years, the CMO have had the shortest shelf life in the C-suite. And most people would automatically think, well, it's because they suck at their job. They must not be very good. Well, of course, there's more to this story. And the problem is in the hiring and the recruiting, there's not enough diligence done behind the scenes to make sure the right CMO is married to the right CEO, right? And the culture and everything else and on and on and on. And of all the CMOs I've talked to, they are completely in favor of this, saying, one, you are the perfect person to do this. And two, it is incredibly needed, right? So that's one of my side things that I'm working on. Another one is I'm finally getting off my butt, and you will appreciate this because you are a master at this, is putting pen to paper on my own show, of starting my own podcast, right? Because of my relationships, because of my personality, because of my ability to never shut up and talk, right? But it's been long in the works. I'm putting the finishing touches on what I want this to be. I think is a pretty unique idea. And in fact, I'll pick your brain off the air about that, to what I want to do, right? And just do this. And you are absolutely one of my inspirations for sure to what you've accomplished, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. And it's time, right? It's just time where I have so much knowledge and so much information. And I'm such a big believer in paying it forward as well. So I also mentor a bunch of younger people on their careers, whether it's marketing, whether it's writing. I'm just that way. I just love, love, love to mentor. So between the CMO recruiting thing, I'm working on a book idea. You're like me. I'm sure you always have at least 2 or 3 book ideas in your head,
Right.
whether you want them or not.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next about, because it's such a natural for you. I mean, both the podcast is a natural for you, and certainly with all of your massive amounts of writing, a book. I'm like, where the hell is the Steve Olensky book?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm working on is taking a lot of my old Forbes pieces and compiling them and put them into buckets. Like, here's 10 pieces I wrote on marketing, and then bring them up to speed as they currently sit today, right? And if I interviewed somebody famous, then go back and talk to them again now, right? So kind of do like an anthology, right, of my Forbes greatest hits. Sound like you're a musical artist, right? But that to me is and other people have said, you got to do that. It's a low hanging kind of thing because I have the content. I have over 1,500 articles that I wrote for Forbes over my 10 years there, right? I'm blessed to be a very prolific writer, and take those, put them in buckets, package them up, right, and put them out, right? So that's another thing. Thank you for reminding me of that. Another project that I want to work on is bringing old articles up to speed because they're still relevant, right? And they're still like, hey, this is what I wrote about in 2015. This is how it looks today. So that's coming as well.
Totally. Wow. I love it. Well, so 2 final questions here as we wrap up. The final question is, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Steve Olensky brilliance? But even before we get to that, if we were to leave folks with one big picture sort of core thought around everything that we talked about today, Steve, around writing, around marketing, around building relationships, around authenticity, around interviewing, what do you hope that sort of overall thought might be that you'd like to leave folks with?
It just comes down to being very genuine and very transparent. I know that sounds like a cliche. I don't mean it that way, but to me, it's not a cliche if it's true, right? And that's how I built my career. That's how people have expressed to me why they want to stay close to me. I have a saying that I don't tell people what they want to hear. I tell people what they need to hear. And there's a huge discernible difference in that. And I know that's one of the reasons it's endeared me to so many people who have stayed close to me and reach out to me and ask me my advice on careers and everything else, right? And again, biggest C-levels of the world, right? Asking little old, college dropout Steve Olensky, right? So there must be something to this that I'm doing, right? It's so important to have, it's easier said than done, but to have that support system, right, in place. And I mentioned, when I first started out, it was my ex-wife and another family member. Today, I have a small group of people who are my complete and utter support staff, who keep me honest, right, who keep me going, right, who kick me in the butt when I need to be kicked in the butt, right, because you get a little complacent, right, and you get a little full of yourself. And I'm always, surrounded by friends and family to go, yeah, you went to the Grammy Awards, big deal. You're still the same schmuck that I knew when you were 10 years old, right? So it's really important to have that internal support.
I love that. Absolutely right. So where do people get connected and stay connected to more Steve? Website, LinkedIn, what are your favorite social media channels? How would you like folks to connect with you?
So definitely Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn are my primary social accounts. So I'm at Steve Olensky. It's Olenski. My website is cmo-whisperer.com. If you Google my name, Steve Olensky, a lot of stuff comes up, not just Forbes, but I wrote for Business Insider. You'll see that. You'll see Ad Age, Huffington Post, and on it. You're going to go, Jesus, who hasn't this guy written for, right? And I apologize in advance for that. But Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, by all means, look me up. I will befriend anybody. I will help anybody I can. That's just who I am.
Awesome. Steve Olensky, you're a rock star. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.